I'm going to preview the 1 seed UConn versus the 1 seed Purdue men's basketball game, which will be played tomorrow, April 8th at 8:20 p.m. Central Time on TBS. So UConn is 36-3 on the season and 18-2 in the Big East, while Purdue is 34-4 on the season and 17-3 in the Big Ten. And currently, UConn is favored by 6.5 points. And I'm going to go over both of these teams, like statistically, like individual players, even their heights and their weights and the position, besides the stats. And I apologize if I'm looking down because I cannot memorize all this stuff. But first, I am going to go over UConn side of things first. But then after I go over the stats, I will go over the keys to the game for both of these teams. So, the first player for UConn to mention is Tristan Newton. He's a 6'5", 195-pound guard. That's a senior, and he's a super senior. 14.9 points per game, 6.6 rebounds per game, 6.2 assists per game, 0.9 steals per game, 1.7 fouls per game, 2.5 turnovers per game, 80.2% on free throws on 202 attempts, and 31.9% on threes on 216 attempts. And there's Cam Spencer for UConn I need to mention next. And he's a 6'4", 205-pound guard. That's a senior. And he is a fourth-year senior, I believe. I know he played one other year, like at Loyola, Maryland, but only 5 games. I think that's enough for medical redshirt. Maybe he'll come back for a COVID year, but that's besides the point here. 14.4 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game, 3.7 assists per game, 1.5 steals per game, 2.1 fouls per game, 1 turnover per game, 44.3% on threes on 221 attempts, 91.1% on free throws on 90 attempts. And there's Donovan Clingan, which he could be NBA bound after this, but he's a 7'2", 280-pound center. That's a sophomore. 13.1 points per game, 7.4 rebounds per game, 2.5 blocks per game, 0.5 steals per game, 2 fouls per game, 0.8 turns per game, 2 for 7 on threes, which is 28.6%, and 58% on free throws on 138 attempts. So he's your hack-a-shack guy if you need to hack-a-shack. I mean, this is on free throws. And there's Stephon Castle, 6'6", 215-pound guard. That's a freshman. He might be NBA bound after this. 11 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, 2.9 assists per game, 0.5 blocks per game, 0.8 steals per game, 2.5 fouls per game, 1.5 turnovers per game, 26.8% on threes on 71 attempts, 76.4% on free throws on 106 attempts. And Hassan Diarra, or Jara, Diarra, a 6'2", 190-pound guard. That's a senior. He's a fourth-year senior at that. So he might come back for a COVID year. 6 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, 2.4 assists per game, 0.8 steals per game, 1.8 fouls per game, 1.1 turnovers per game, 35.3% on threes on 68 attempts, 78% on free throws on 59 attempts. And it's their Samson Johnson, who is a 6'2", 10-inch, 225-pound forward. That's a junior. 5.4 points per game, 2.8 rebounds per game, 0.9 blocks per game, 2.9 fouls per game, 0.7 turnovers per game, 0 for 2 on threes, 43.2% on free throws on 37 attempts. So he's another guy you could hack a shack if you have to. And I'm going to go over like Solomon Ball as well. A 6'3", 185-pound guard. That's a freshman. 3.4 points per game, 0.7 fouls per game, 31.9% on threes on 72 attempts, 69.6% on free throws on 23 attempts. And the last player I'm going to mention is Jalen Stewart, because I'm just going over guys I normally play. He's a 6'7", 205-pound guard. Forward. That's a freshman. 2.5 points per game, 0.8 fouls per game, 27% on threes on 37 attempts, 43.8% on free throws on 16 attempts. So that's all I have to say on that. And first player I'm going to mention for Purdue is obviously Zach Edey. He could be NBA bound. He might not. He might be, but I'm not positive. A 6 foot 4 inch, 300 pound center. That's a senior, a fourth year senior. So he does have a COVID year. 24.9 points per game, 12.2 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists per game, 2.2 blocks per game, 1.9 fouls per game, 2.3 turnovers per game, 1 for 2 on threes, 71.1% on free throws on 426 attempts. There's Braden Smith, who is a 6 foot, 175-pound guard. That's a sophomore. 12 points per game, 5.9 rebounds per game, 7.5 assists per game, 1.6 steals per game, 1.6 fouls per game, 2.7 turnovers per game, 43% on threes on 128 attempts, 79.7% on free throws on 79 attempts. And there's Lance Jones, a 6 foot 1 inch, 200-pound guard. That's a senior, and he's a fifth year senior at that. So no extra year after this. So 11.9 points per game, 2.7 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game, 1.3 steals per game, 1.9 fouls per game, 1.5 turnovers per game, 35.9% on threes on 223 attempts, 73.9% on free throws on 92 attempts. And there's Fletcher Lawyer. Number 2, he's a 6 foot 4 inch, 180-pound guard. That's a sophomore. 10.6 points per game, 2.1 rebounds per game. 2 assists per game. Yep, 2.1 rebounds per game. 0.8 steals per game, 1.5 fouls per game, 1.2 turnovers per game. 44.7% on threes on 141 attempts, 86.1% on free throws on 101 attempts. From there, it's like nobody else in double figures, and it's like Mason Gillis, a 6 foot 6 inch, 225-pound forward. That's a senior. He has a COVID year if he so desires. 6.7 points per game, 3.9 rebounds per game, 1.4 fouls per game, 0.8 turnovers per game, 47.2% on threes on 123 attempts, 86% on free throws on 43 attempts. And there's Trey Kaufman Wren, 6 foot 9 inch, 230-pound forward. That's a sophomore. 6.4 points per game, 4.1 rebounds per game, 1.4 fouls per game, 0.7 turnovers per game, 8 for 24 on threes, 55.7% on free throws on 88 attempts. So he's your hack a Shaq guy. Then I'm going to go with like Miles Colvin. I don't know how likely he's going to play, but 6 foot 5 inch, 200-pound guard. It's a freshman. 3.4 points per game, 0.7 fouls per game, 42.9% on threes on 56 attempts, 5 for 10 on free throws. Camden Hyde, Heide. I apologize if I butchered that. A 6 foot 7 inch, 205-pound forward. That's a freshman. 3.3 points per game, 1.9 rebounds per game, 1.5 turnovers a game, 45% on threes on 40 attempts, 73.3% on free throws on 15 attempts. Okay, there's only 2 more guys I'm going to go ahead and mention. It's Caleb First is the first guy. A 6 foot 10 inch, 225-pound forward. That's a junior. 2.2 points per game, 2.5 rebounds per game, 0.9 fouls per game, 0.5 turns per game, 27.3% on threes on 11 attempts, 67.6% on free throws on 34 attempts. And last is Ethan Morton, a 6 foot 7 inch, 215-pound guard. That's a senior, and he's only a 4th year guy, but I don't know how likely he's going to play. He's like 0.7 points per game, 0.8 fouls per game, 21.1% on threes on 19 attempts, 57.1% on free throws on 7 attempts. So obviously you got to make adjustments on the fly, both offensively and defensively. I'm not talking about first half to second half either. I'm talking about possession by possession, timeout to timeout. And there might be some stretches here and there that might be longer without a call or a break in the action, like a turnover out of bounds or a foul and all that. You just gotta be mentally tough and you gotta be You got to be ball tough. I mean, you don't want to let somebody steal the ball out of rebound, and you don't want to have those type of turnovers that are mind-boggling to you, like a over and back, a 10-second call. I mean, you got to limit your turnovers. Of course, on defense, you want to force turnovers, especially because sometimes your best offense comes from your defense. You got to have good shot selection. Of course, you want to make it difficult as much as possible on defense. Contain the shooters, contain the slashers. And the problem for UConn against Purdue is if you double team Zach Edey, he will pass it out. And, I mean, at times he can pass the ball out. So, he's not like a horrible passer. He could pass the ball instead of for some shots. Of course, you got to correct what you did wrong last game and bring it into this game because this is a national championship. I mean, and you got to do what you did well last game into this game for both these teams. You got to get some points out turnovers, points in the paint, fast break points, second chance points and of course you on defense you want to limit that as much as possible. You don't want to let the other team get to the free throw line, but if you get to the free throw line on offense, you've got to make your free throws count because that's sometimes the difference in the game. Of course, rebounding ball is a difference. Both of these teams dominated on the glass last game, so it's going to be interesting on that battle because the battle on the rebounds could make the ultimate difference in the game. And you don't want to limit your foul trouble as much as possible. Of course, you want the other team in foul trouble, especially the best players like a Zach Edey, for example, or all those like the better double-digit scores for UConn, like Tristan Newton, or Cam Spencer, Alex Caravan, Donovan Clingan. That's just naming some guys, and you gotta have your role guys step up, and it would be huge if you get more bench points than the other team, but that doesn't guarantee you're gonna win. I'm just telling the truth. You gotta have some other unsung heroes step up in this game, and if you're a super senior and this is your last game, you gotta go out there and leave no. You don't want to have anything you want to regret about this game. Or if you're like an NBA draft pick that's in the first round, you might be gone. Anyway, like if you're for sure a lottery pick, you're gonna be probably gone. You don't want to have any regret, and you gotta keep your cool, and you don't want to get like a technical foul or flagrant foul or one or two. It doesn't really matter. You don't want flagrant fouls or a technical foul because that's two shots and the ball. I mean, that's the thing. And I'm talking about the coaches too on the text. And I get there might be some questionable officiating. And I hope the officiating is good in this game. I really, really do. But you've just got to find a way to work around that and try and make enough plays so that one particular call might not affect the game entirely. You don't want to have like illegal screens or offensive fouls because that's a turnover, and I get that's a dead ball, but still you don't want to have limit your turnovers as much as possible. And I'm especially saying if you get up to close to 20 turnovers in a game, you're probably not going to win unless the other team has the same amount or a little bit more or near that amount. Look, Purdue last game turned the ball over a bunch when you look at the stats. 16 times. If they do that against UConn, I'm sorry. I don't think Purdue's going to win that. And Zach Edey had 5 turnovers. Braden Smith had 5 turnovers. And I would say the key too on defense is to make the opposing team shoot below 40%, like 35, 33. And same thing goes for the 3-point line. Like make it like 33% or less. I mean, that's the thing. And all this. In this game here. And I really think the spread might be a little big. But I get it because UConn's been running through everybody that they played in the tournament. It's kind of like one of these matchups where Zach Edey's the best player in terms of stats going into this game for Purdue, yet UConn is just a machine. And we've seen games I'm not just talking about men's basketball. I talk about women's basketball as well, where one player, that team with the superstar could beat the other team, even though they might not have a true superstar. But don't get me wrong, UConn does have a lot of some double-digit scores, and they could go off anytime. And and we also see some games where one player is not enough to win. I mean, back in 1979 when Indiana State had Larry Bird against Magic Johnson and the Michigan State Spartans, Michigan State won that game. So I'm just saying, you're going to make everything difficult for the opposing team as much as possible, especially for the best players. And don't let... It's going to be an intriguing battle between Klingon and Zach Edey. I mean, both guys are about 7 feet tall. Going head-to-head, probably. And we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But I'm definitely going to recap this game the next day, as well as get a roster outlook. And this is pending transfer portal and NBA draft. And I'm even going to mention a few guys that might be off to the NBA for UConn. And even Zach Edey for Purdue might be NBA bound. He might be he's probably a first round pick right now. I just don't know if he really wants to run that back one more year or think about getting higher in the draft. And you know that's a risk for these players. You got to be physically tougher. You got to demonstrate, be the tougher team out there physically as well. I mean, you don't want to get pushed around. And it would be huge to get some charges and, of course, blocks. Because sometimes, blocking a shot can lead into transition points. I mean, that's the thing. And you got to have a good number of assists, too. But you want to limit that, obviously, on defense. And I kind of thought these two teams would meet up against each other, to be honest. Purdue against Alabama. Alabama doesn't play a lick of defense. While NC State, yes, they had a great... that's UConn against Alabama, not Purdue against Alabama. But you get the whole point. UConn doesn't play... they are a better team, and they play more defense than Alabama ever does. And you got to play your game and play with nothing to lose. With no pressure going into this game. And you got to go out there, give your all, and see what happens in all this. And you know that Purdue beat NC State last game. I kind of thought NC State was probably going to run out of gas eventually and hit the wall against somebody. And that was the game that I thought, yeah, they're probably going to lose. But then again, they went on this run for so long. And you can't have a hangover from last game to this game and expect this game to be easy. Oh, no. You go out there and be prepared for war. And obviously, you want to try to exploit the weaknesses for the other team. As much as possible. So, that's taking care of most of the keys to the game for both of these teams. So, anyways, if you like this content, hit the like and subscribe button. See you guys later. On the road to 600 subscribers. Of course, ultimate goal is 1,000 or more. So, make money out this course. Like a video, comment video. Really helps YouTube algorithm so more people can see it. Sharing the video does help as well so more people can watch. And if you're watching and not subscribed, hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell as well.